This one comes from another driver of the same company I work for. A little background on Paul. I feel is important to this story. Paul was a 6'4", 235-pound muscular guy who was 100% health to nuts. He doesn't drink or use any type of tobacco products. He also very rarely is scared by anything. Also worth noting, all of our trucks have inboard cameras facing the driver in road in case of an accident. There is evidence of what happened. They only come on if the truck experiences a hard impact or the driver slammed on the brakes, but only records for 13 seconds. Now, on with the story. When a truck has any sort of problem that the company believes its mechanics can fix, and if it's near an S terminal, they will generally have their driver bring the truck to be looked at. One day while in our Alabama terminal, Paul noticed his truck was idling funny, so he decided to have it looked at before leaving. The mechanic looked at it, found the problem, and said he would have to swap it into a different truck for the time being, as the repair would take a few days, which Paul did not have. He assigned him a truck and said, "It's been freshly processed. The previous driver suffered a heart attack and died in the sleeper." Paul just shrugs it off and puts his bags in it, back under the load, and leaves. The first few days went about as normal as they could go. The fourth day, however, Paul said he began to notice a very odd smell, like maybe cigar or incense was burning. He blew it off, thinking maybe the previous owner smoked or burned some candles or something when he parked. The smell goes away and Paul continues on his way. When he finally stops that evening, he goes inside the truck stop to grab some food. Paul always brought his Yorkie, Sylvester, with him, so when he stopped he could crack the window of the truck and allow fresh air for his dog. As he was walking back to his truck, he notices smoke is coming from the cracked windows. He rushes to his truck, fearing Sylvester may have chewed on a wire and caused something on fire. But when he opens the door, the truck has no smoke in it, only the smell he had experienced earlier in the day. Putting it off as him being tired and seeing things, Paul climbs in with Sylvester, gives him his usual Slim Jim and Smart Water snack and drink, and begins to eat his own dinner. After eating, he closes the curtains that wrap around the cab, blocking out anyone from outside being able to see in. He proceeds to lay down and watch a movie on his tablet. After a while, he begins nodding off and he hears the curtains move. Popping his eyes open, Paul noticed the driver's side curtain is slightly open. Thinking wind is coming from the cracked windows, he closes it, rolls the windows up, and goes to lay back down. He finally falls asleep and wakes up at 2 a.m. to the smell again, but this time, smoke is visible through the lights that crept through the small cracks of the curtains. Paul jumps up and looks around, but there aren't any visible signs of a fire or anything that could produce smoke. Thinking he was hallucinating, Paul lays back down to go back to sleep when he hears a very raspy male voice whisper, "Help me." Now Paul is beginning to become concerned and realizing it may not be a hallucination he's experiencing. But remaining optimistic, he puts it off as he's still being an hallucination and rows off over to go back to sleep. Paul wakes up to a sudden jerk of the truck rolling over. He sees the camera light indicating it's recording. It still smells like the strange smell, and he sees the smoky haze. Thinking he has been hit by another driver backing into the spot next to him, he pulls the curtain, but he sees nothing. The parking lot is dead. Suddenly, the phone begins ringing. It's the overnight safety manager, Kate, calling. Paul is thinking that they are calling to see what happened. He answers by saying, "Hey Kate, everything is okay." Kate frantically shouts at him to get out of the truck now. "Don't think about it, just get out of the truck." He grabs Sylvester, climbs out of the truck, while yelling, "Kate, what's going on?" He asks her, confused and so half asleep, "Paul, there is a man in your truck. You didn't see him?" He assured her he is the only person in the truck, and even goes back inside to show her nothing is there. Kate says, "Give me 1 second and I'll FaceTime you and show you." He accepts the FaceTime and sees the computer screen with the video feed from his truck. Kate starts the video and immediately notices a large, transparent man sitting in the passenger seat staring at him as he sleeps. Extremely unnerved by this, Paul immediately jumps out of the truck yelling. Kate asks if he can see any more of our company trucks in the lot, as it's near a terminal and generally has more than 2 of our own trucks there. But Paul was too shaken up to be able to notice anything. Knowing he would only be able to drive again within the hour, He asked Kate to send a request for him to go home into another truck. Once he found her, she was very pale and noticeably distraught. Paul asked her what was wrong and she showed him a picture of the last driver. He was an identical match to the man watching him sleep and frequently smoked brandy-flavored Black & Mild cigars. Paul immediately transferred to a new truck, making sure its last driver was still living.
I was experiencing a lot of weird paranormal stuff. It was really hard for me to get a nice sleep at night. For some reason, I was always hearing noises and seeing shadows inside and outside of my house. My best friend knew that I was going through a tough time, but never showed any fear of anything I would tell him. Sometime, he would spend the night over and we would watch movies. Every now and then, he would notice things around my house and tell me the next day. One night, I had told my best friend and my mom something that was bugging me. I had heard noises coming from outside my bedroom walls, knocks from my window, and footsteps on the roof. But of course, they didn't believe me, telling me it's all in my head, saying that I think about it too much, so I must have heard it in my mind or something. This would piss me off because why would I make something like this up? I told them how much that I would wish that I didn't hear this, so why would I want to? Later on that night, we were in the kitchen. My friend and I were sitting at the dining table doing some drawings and painting. My mother was listening to our music and cleaning the kitchen. My dad was visiting family in El Salvador at the time, so he wasn't around when this was happening. Anyways, as the night sees later, it's around 2 a.m., and we all hear a loud bang coming from outside the kitchen door. This is an exit door that's on the side of the house that leads to the backyard. Once we all heard that loud bang, we looked at each other, like, what was that? My friend looks at me, saying, whoa. I could see that they got spooked as I looked back at them, with a sinister smile. I didn't mean to smile at them like that, but after all of that happened, it was all in my head. It got me excited that my wish was about to come true, that they are about to hear what goes down, and that I'm not the only one experiencing this anymore. I tell my mom to go open that door and see if it's all in her head. My friend is looking at the window that was wide open behind me. I think there's someone outside, he said. Yeah, it's nothing, I replied. I always had this sense of feeling when something was there. I knew no one was outside, but there was something out there. Then we hear the scratching along the walls going on in the backyard. Again, my mom and my best friend was shocked. I told her, I told you so, but she wouldn't believe me. Now the only thing left is the footsteps on the roof. Maybe it's a raccoon, my friend said. I hope we get to hear the footsteps on the roof, then tell me that's a raccoon. My mom was amazed on how she got to hear all of this. I always told her what I would hear at night, but she never believed me. 15 minutes goes by, and there it was, the footsteps on the roof. The look my mom and my friend gave me was priceless. Now tell me that's a raccoon, I said. My friend said, hell nah, that's someone walking on your roof. My mom says it to my friend, you're staying over tonight. I don't think it's a good idea to go home this late, especially with all that's going on. Suddenly, the noises started coming from my room. We all got up and rushed to my bedroom, this time thinking maybe it is someone trying to break in. We checked my room, and the window was shut closed. For the first time, I noticed something different, something I never thought was true. I had heard some people tell me that there's got to be some spirit or ghost attached to something. To get rid of the spirit, I need to find what that object is. Well, that night, I saw a shadow move out of the hallway into a coconut monkey. It was a souvenir that my dad once gave me from El Salvador. The next day, I was too tired to go to school. I told my mom what I had seen, and she suggested that I should destroy it. Later that day, my friend came to my house again. I told him what I had seen and what I needed to do. He was all for it, So I grabbed a hammer and took it outside and destroyed it. My friend was tripping out on how this can be the reason why this was all happening. I hope this is it and I hope this works. I slammed it into the ground and smashed it with my hammer, and that was the end of it. Days later, my mom noticed that I was sleeping better and the night was more peaceful. My friend still comes over, spends the nights. Everything was normal. About 1 month later, my dad comes back from El Salvador and tells me that he brought me another souvenir. I open it and I can't believe what I saw. Another freaking coconut monkey.
Before I get into my experience, I should preface it with a few facts. I'm a biologist, and as such, I place a lot of weight of evidence and try to ignore eyewitness accounts and anecdotal experiences. To me, the word paranormal is a misnomer. There are simply things we don't understand yet. I also have to admit that I use cannabis frequently, but not for fun. It's at the direction of my physician. As such, I don't really use any strains that are strong enough to affect me in any other way than relieving pain and allowing me to fall asleep. I've been doing it for 2 years now, and I've never had an experience like I did 2 nights ago. We live in Southern California, and we recently moved to a beach city. Our new home is being remodeled, so we're staying in another home my family owns temporarily. My family only purchased this home a month back, and they haven't moved in or began to work on it yet. From the very outset, the house oozed with darkness and straight out weird floor plans that get you lost, doors to nowhere, a secret entrance to the garage, and a bonus room that is only 10 feet by 10 feet, has a skylight and 2 padlocks. I decided to lock that room and never go in it again, since it's going to be demolished soon anyway. There were mirrors everywhere, and it creeped the hell out of my wife. They looked like the mirrors in that horror film Oculus, but much smaller, and there were as many as 10. I removed those from the garage, except for the largest one, which was bolted onto the wall. I had no tools with me at the time. Once we got settled, I started to check the bedrooms out and only got creepier from there. 2 of the bedrooms have windows, but these windows didn't go outside. They were one-way mirrors into other rooms in the house, including that creepy 10 by 10 room. I decided not to tell my wife about those 2 bedrooms, suggested that we put our air mattress in the living room. She didn't question this as our furniture was in storage and there was no furniture in the home. She just assumed I wanted to watch the large television that was in that room. We went to sleep just fine that night. Actually, being thrilled that we moved in and had an ocean view, I pushed the creepiness out of my mind as the stress from the move. I dismissed the house's odd design and chalked it out to the original owners, who built the home in 1966, just being really bad at DIY, and that was lying to myself, to be honest. I woke up the next morning, and that's when things started to get bad. As I walked down the hallway, the large mirror caught my attention. I looked at the top of the name of the past owners that were carved into the mirror. It wrote, "Enjoy your new home, from Mr. and Mrs. We can call him Pizza." I'm not being derogatory or funny, but it's the first thing that comes to my mind about the previous owners, and something I probably should have mentioned before, because they had about 4 industrial-sized pizza ovens in the house. This was odd, because I was told they were hermits. Anyway, back to the mirror. I tried to get it down without tools for at least 10 minutes the day before. This carving was not there, but I ignored it and told myself I was just stressed and it must have been there the day before, I just didn't see it. But something in my stomach just told me that it wasn't. I decided we needed to get out of the house. It was sunny and we're 6 blocks from the beach. We didn't move to a beach city to sit inside all day anyway. We decided to put our new puppy in one of the bedrooms, as he's old enough to be on his own, but I wasn't ready to give him free reign of a new house, as huskies are known to be escape artists. We went out and had a good time. When I came back, I heard my puppy crying. I ran to the bedroom to let him out, but it was locked. From the inside, I could hear whispering, but not enough to make it out. Screw this, I said, and kicked the door in. I didn't care since it was getting replaced anyway. I barged in and it was pitch black. It shouldn't have been because I play a TV in the background with nature noises to calm the dog down while we are at home. I turned on the light and there was no one there. Not even my dog. I began to panic when I heard him crying again, but it was in another room. Not the one I put him in, and he certainly didn't do this on his own. Found him locked in that creepy 10 by 10 room. I let him out, assuming someone was screwing with us, and changed all the locks. I went to sit on the air mattress in distress. I tried to get some guilty pleasure TV to make me feel better. I couldn't leave the house as there was a technician on the way to install Wi-Fi, which we desperately needed as there are times in this city where you can't even get a weak signal. The installation appointment window came and passed. I'm patient, so I waited another hour and a half before calling the company. By this time it was dark outside and they told me that there was an unforeseen issue and that they couldn't install today and they would be there first thing in the morning, which I guess was fine. The night came and we fell asleep until about 3 a.m. when I heard a loud, rumbling growl. It's the only way I can really explain it, but not like you'd hear from a dog. Being a typically overcrowded beach city, there wasn't really any wildlife except for what's in the ocean. Next I heard a shattering noise. Yup, it was in the 10 by 10 room again. I went ready to finally fight the person who was screwing with us. I went into the room and of course there was no one there. I looked at my one-way mirror that went to the next bedroom. From the side you could see your reflection, but it was mostly shattered. I went to inspect it and there was a bullet hole. There was an exit bullet too. I'm sure of it because I've grown up with firearms my entire life since my dad is a cop. I don't think anyone else heard it. Also, it's also odd because the land is premium here. Our neighbors are less than 20 feet away. There was nothing I could do but lock the doors again and go back to sleep. Not telling my wife what I saw. Trying to push it out of my head altogether. The morning came and the internet service technician was there. I opened the door and he absolutely looked terrified and seemed like he didn't want to come in. When he saw me, he instantly relaxed and smiled like we were brothers who hadn't seen each other in years. He said he was happy to see me, assuming he was just being polite, so he got a good customer service response on those surveys they always ask you to take. But he continued at how relieved he was to see a normal person at this home. So, being curious, I quizzed him. He told me that most of the people in the neighborhood were afraid of this home. He told me that the neighborhood was initially settled by Italian immigrants, and the previous owners fit into that group. He told me that the woman who lived here was regarded as a practitioner of Stragaria. I had never heard this before, but he told me it was an ancient form of mysticism rooted in Catholic roots. The closest English definition would be witchcraft. Being the cynical biologist that I was, I laughed, thanked him for coming, and he left. I went into one of the spare bedrooms because we left our luggage in there, and I didn't think it was necessary to move it. As I was and am still skeptical for the most part. I only say most part because of what happened next. The closet door in the room was open, and it was extremely heavy wooden sliding door that no one in the house would have had the strength to move other than me. There was a box of photos in there, and stupidly, I decided to look. Almost all of them were of the previous owner and her dog. She doesn't look so creepy to me, I thought. Time came for bed, and I was pretty stressed. So, I went outside to smoke a little pot so I could chill out and fall asleep. The marine layer had rolled in and visibility was only 10 feet. It was also about 59 degrees. To some that might not be very cold, but we're spoiled here and it's enough to make all tourists to beachgoers stay home. I sat outside and started getting my things ready to smoke. A wife came outside and we talked. It was extremely barren outside. There were no cars or people on the street and it was almost completely silent, except for the sound of a barking dog almost 2 blocks away. My wife went inside, and I went back to the edge of the yard where I smoke, so it doesn't go to the neighbor's window. In this section of the yard, I would perch on the ledge which normally would give you a beautiful view of the harbor lights, but not tonight with the fog. Oh well, I thought. It was about to light up when an extremely frail Caucasian woman that looked elderly came from around the corner. She was walking a dog. The dog I had seen in those photos from the box in the room. Lots of people like small dogs, I thought. In this part of town, they were almost an accessory. She walked by extremely slow, deliberately, slower than she would be for a normal person even her age. She walked past me and stopped at the neighbor's driveway, faced away looking at the harbor, which again was odd because you could see nothing. She did this for maybe 10 minutes. I assumed she hadn't noticed me. She began turning her head back and forth quickly in an unnatural jerking motion, as if she was paranoid about being attacked at any moment. I once more did something incredibly stupid. Jumping down from my perch, I said, "Hello, ma'am. Do you need help? Can I help you? Do you need help going inside or something where it's warm?" She said nothing but jerked her head once more, finally fixating on me. Her face was extremely grimace, like she was angry. Not just normally angry, but ready to fight angry. I started to walk closer towards her, as I couldn't really make her face out. I had no fear. I'm 185 centimeters tall and weigh about 112 kilograms. She looked to be about 140 centimeters at most, and definitely no more than 45 kilograms of that. She took a step towards me, as well, and came into view. I was immediately terrified, and my heart rate was higher than it ever had been in my life. I felt like I just did hard cardio exercise. It was the woman from the photos. She was pale, paler than normal. She smelled like rotting flesh. She was soaking wet, but the worst part of it was her darker, blood-red eyes. They were nightmarish. I still have nightmares about them to this day. They were not just like pupils, but her entire eye was red. I screamed like a small child and jumped back, taking a defensive posture, ready to fight till the end. She then smiled and took a step back, fading into thin air. I decided I didn't need to sleep that night, as I was pretty terrified and didn't want to smoke that joint anymore. I called my mother the next morning and told her she needed to move up the demolition date of the house. Not sure if that would be the end of it. I don't have a concrete answer for my experiences either. Rational or not, my peace of mind is worth more. So we'll be staying at an extended stay hotel until our place is ready. Till this day, I can't explain what is happening inside that house. Three years ago, my girlfriend and I decided to hike up near her parents' place in Oregon when we went to visit them for a week. We decided to bring camping gear and to stay the night. I had only been camping once before, and it was in Boy Scouts, so it had been a long time. My girlfriend grew up camping and knows her way around the area very well. So, myself, her, and her parents' dog, Bear, a huge Newfoundland lab mix, headed up the trail. We saw a few people out, but they were mostly just day hikers. People loved Bear and stopped to pet him. So a little after 6 we made camp, set up our tent, and pull out our grub. We had decided to buy big sub sandwiches, stuff for s'mores, chips, and a few tall boys of beer. I fired up a joint and she pulled out her guitar after we finished eating. Great relaxing night, and we started winding down, getting ready to head to bed. She was in the tent getting dressed for bed, while I was finishing the joint and making sure the fire was out. Suddenly, Bear growls this low menacing growl I've never heard him do before. I pet him and look around, figuring it's an animal or something. We get to sleep at around 1. I wake up and my girlfriend is shaking. She looks terrified. I hear Bear growling beside us, and she holds her finger up, talking low. She tells me she woke up to voices. I listen and I hear what sounds like 2 men talking. Then we hear something absolutely terrifying. One of them says to his friend, "I'll take the girl, you get rid of the guy." I knew we were screwed. We had no weapons of any sort. My girlfriend unzips the tent and Bear rockets out. I've never seen him move that fast in my life. I hear one of the guys yell, "Oh shit," and I hear Bear snarling and growling, and I hear them running. My girlfriend takes the satellite phone in. Her dad insisted that we carry it, and, thank God, calls her dad. He calls law enforcement and they sent people out to there. They told us to stay in the tent. Barrett comes back out of breath with no sign of the guys and we wait for the ranger. When they show up, they find no sign of the guys, save for truck tires and some cigarette butts. They gave us a ride back down to our car later that day. Barrett got a steak and plenty of love.
This happened when I was 7, and I was sleeping in my parents' room because I didn't have my own room at the time. My dad was working at the casino down in Laughlin, which was about 30 miles away from my house at the time, in a housing complex where every house looks exactly the same, except for the different colored shack was on the top of the houses. It was around 2:32 in the morning when I woke up to go to the bathroom and get a glass of water before going back to sleep. I spent a while in the bathroom, and since I didn't have a phone at the time, I was playing with my old SpongeBob Nosher name doll from around 2001. I was a complete SpongeBob fan, as I had Patrick and Scuba toys in my house's computer room. All my toys were kept in a closet in that room. I finished going to the bathroom and proceeded to go to the kitchen, where my grandfather was asleep and left the television on. I just left it on, as he tends to keep it on 24/7. I seemed a bit tense in the kitchen, but I just ignored it. I poured myself a glass of water from our old water dispenser from when we lived in Tuscan. I went back to my parents' room and laid back down after drinking my water. Around 10 minutes passed, and I couldn't fall back to sleep. I looked for my mother's iPad, which I usually just watch YouTubes on until I fall asleep. I found the iPad case, opened it, and it was dead. I put it back where I found it, and just laid there. 2 minutes passed, and I suddenly had the urge to sit up. I followed the urge and sat up, stuck staring in the corner where my parents' lamp is. It turned off randomly, and I saw some sort of black figure. It choked me until I would wake my mother up, who was right next to me in the bed. She got up and I could barely speak, and I was completely out of breath. She grabbed me and ran to the living room where my grandfather was sleeping, and told me to sleep out there for the rest of the night. The next day after that, I was sitting on the couch with my SpongeBob doll and my Woody doll. My Woody doll wouldn't stop going off, so we had to take out the batteries. A few hours after that, the Woody doll went off again, but this time in a much louder manner, to where you could hear it from all the way down the hall from the back of my house. It just said, "Reach for the sky." I grabbed it, checked the batteries after it was done saying the phrase, and the batteries weren't even in there. So it just makes it even more confusing. Not to mention that my SpongeBob dad said, "I'm going to kill you, James," which is my name, but was never programmed into the doll, nor was that phrase. So it just makes it even more creepier. I'm 12 now, and every time I wake up at around 3 a.m., I feel like something is watching me. I was in the woods camping with my friends, and we were screwing around. Just the normal teenage activity. By the time everyone was starting to bunk down, we heard some screaming across the park. We dismissed it as a pack of coyotes howling at the moon. As it turned out, what we heard wasn't coyotes, but actually something much worse. Later that night, I woke up to the sound of sticks snapping. I thought it was my friend putting more wood into the fire, which didn't make sense because we were trying to sleep, and we didn't need the fire at that moment. I whispered to my friend, and he was in a tent. We decided it was just a critter and rolled back over to sleep. Then something started scratching at my tent. I was still half asleep when my friend called me, "AJ," and I realized it wasn't my friend, but there was this huge shadow of this thing outside my tent. By my estimation, it was easily 7 feet tall. It was trying to get in my tent, and when I realized what it was doing, I grabbed my hunting knife. I take it with me on camping trips, and yelled at it to get the fuck away from me. I realized I knew it was coming for me, and it started to scratch at the tent more. At which point, I screamed louder than I have ever screamed in my entire life. I think I finally scared it off with that. We decided to pack up and head the hell home. When we got to the exit of the park, I felt so relieved, and when I got home, I did some research and found out what was most likely attacking us was probably a skinwalker or a wendigo. I had heard of them before, but never encountered one. Thankfully, me and my friend survived. So, a little background info. I'm a 23-year-old female living in Brisbane, Australia. Throughout my life, I have had quite a few experiences with the paranormal, but that's a different story. So now to the experience at hand. So a couple of months back, my boyfriend, mom, and I went to a tour of an old jail that has been closed for some time. Due to animosity, I won't name the jail, but anyone that lives in Brisbane or Queensland would have heard of this place. It was notorious for being one of the most brutal jails in Australia, and people dreaded being sent there due to the stories they had heard. Now, the original set was 3 buildings, Building A, B, and C. Building A has been closed down for a lot longer than the other 2 buildings. It used to be the house for the gallows. There was 42 people sentenced to death here, 39 men, 2 teenagers, and 1 woman. This building was demolished years ago, and there's a lot of research shown. Whether you believe it or not is a different story, but obviously for past reasons I do, as spirits are drawn to familiarity. Or if they died in a horrific way, or have some unfinished business not allowing them to move on. These spirits are drawn to buildings B, being the men's block, and C, being the women's block, as they were extremely similar. Now, before we went into the actual jail, I was feeling fine. But the moment I went in, I felt this uneasy feeling of dread come over me. Also, my flashlight kept playing up all night. Yes, this was at night, and as soon as we walked out of the jail, the flashlight worked perfectly. So obviously, we were walking around, exploring this place, and I was taking pictures of everything. I didn't look at these pictures for a couple of days afterwards, but when I did, out of around 40 photos, 2 of them seemed to have what looked like orbs in them. The whole time we were walking around, this feeling of dread continued, and I constantly had the feeling of being watched, and this only intensified when we walked into Building C. The tour guide we were with was telling us about the woman that was hung in the gallows. The group we were with was standing in a kind of circle against the wall of the cell block, but I was standing a little back away from everyone with my boyfriend to my left side and my mom to my right, but both weren't close enough to touch me. So, as we were talking about the day she was hung from the gallows, I suddenly felt as if something was being placed around my neck and I was being restrained. Then, just as we were talking about the floor being dropped from under her, the feeling around my neck got tighter and tighter until I felt like I couldn't breathe anymore, and there was nothing that I could do. As soon as we finished talking about her, a feeling of tightness around my neck loosened and I could finally move again. I did check that no one was behind me, and there definitely wasn't any way that somebody could have choked me. My boyfriend and mom weren't even close enough to touch me either. This has never happened to me before or since, and there is no way I can make sense of it. I literally felt like I was being hung from the gallows. Nothing has ever scared me so much in my life before or since.